Hi folks, this is Holly Lane. I'm the director of the University of Florida Literacy Institute, or UFLI. A lot of you have been asking for a preview of our new UFLI Foundations manual. So here we go. Let's take a little tour through the manual. Here's our table of contents, and as you can see, the manual is divided into 4 sections. In the introduction, we provide background information about the science of reading and about teaching foundational reading skills. The second section is an explanation of how to use the materials provided in UFLI Foundations, including guidance through each step of the lesson and additional resources. The third section is our biggest section. That's where all the instructional materials are housed, including 148 fully developed lesson plans. The last section is a set of resources designed to support teachers in their implementation of UFLI Foundations. Let's take a closer look at each section. The first section on the essential background knowledge for teaching foundational reading skills addresses why teachers need to teach foundational reading skills, what the content of foundational reading skills instruction looks like, the key features of effective instruction, and more specifically, how foundational reading skills should be taught. Here's a glimpse into this section of the manual. In it, you'll find information about the science of reading and a summary of research on foundational reading skills instruction. The next section guides the teacher in the implementation of UFLI Foundations. This section explains how to teach each lesson step and how to use all of the other resources. In the implementation guidance section, you'll find information about things like how we suggest breaking up your 90-minute reading block, or suggestions for pacing lessons over the course of a week. Information about how to prepare your classroom, your materials, your students, and so forth is also provided. You'll also find in-depth information about all of the materials and how to use them during the lesson. This is where each step is explained in depth as well. One of my favorite features of the manual is this diagram. I call it the lesson roadmap. This shows you exactly where to find each component of the lesson and how to use it. The next section is the real meat of the manual. This is the instructional materials section. Here's a quick look at our scope and sequence. This is a continuous scope and sequence that covers concepts that should be learned across kindergarten, first, and second grade. The lessons can also be used for older students who are missing some of these skills. In addition to the full scope and sequence, we have a suggested lesson sequence for each grade level. This is the kindergarten suggested sequence. Here's the first grade suggested sequence. You'll see some overlap with kindergarten. The idea is that you'll be coming back to review at the beginning of the year and then continuing on to more advanced skills. Then in second grade, it moves on, again overlapping with some of the earlier skills, but continuing on to even more complex skills. Here's a glimpse of one of our Getting Ready lessons. These lessons include how to implement the sound wall and how to introduce the alphabet and letter formation. The lessons include recommended teacher language. After the 10 Getting Ready lessons, you'll find our core lessons. These are 138 lessons to cover the 128 concepts in the scope and sequence. Each lesson has these 8 steps included. Feedback from teachers in our pilot schools helped us determine that the best way to implement a lesson is to break it over 2 days. This shows how the steps are broken up and about how many minutes should be spent on each step. The first 4 steps of the lesson are geared for warm-up and review of previously taught skills. Step 5 is the introduction of the new concept. Day 2 begins with a review, going back over the new concept that was introduced in Step 5 on the previous day. Then, students are provided with practice reading and spelling words. And each lesson concludes with practice reading and writing connected text. Students read sentences, write sentences, and read a passage or a book. Here's a glimpse at one of our regular core lessons. This one is to introduce the SH digraph. You can see how the 8 steps are laid out, including a very detailed explanation of the new concept, the correspondence between the grapheme SH and the phoneme sh. Here's a closer look at step 5. We provide recommended teacher language so teachers don't have to come up with how to explicitly and systematically teach each skill. This includes an introduction to the target grapheme and an explanation of the articulatory gesture used to produce the target phoneme. In addition to the content for the 8 lesson steps, each lesson plan includes additional resources. We provide a variety of word chains to practice the highlighted concept. We provide word lists that can be used for additional practice as well. We also list any high-frequency words that were addressed. These might be irregular words that were actually taught during the lesson, or other high-frequency regular words that students should be able to read based on where they are in the scope and sequence and based on what was taught in the lesson. Here's one of our more advanced lessons for introducing morphemes. These lessons are organized in essentially the same way. The last section of the manual is our resources section. This section has all the other items you'll need to implement the program. For example, here's our detailed scope and sequence. You can see it provides additional information for each concept. Here's a summary of the grapheme-phoneme correspondences taught, along with the articulatory gesture for each phoneme. Let's take a closer look. As you can see, this lists the phoneme and each of the graphemes that are associated with it. It also lists which lesson each grapheme is introduced in. It also provides a quick way to reference the explanation of the articulatory gesture for each phoneme. In the manual, you'll find a chart that shows how the sound walls will be organized. This is the organization for the sound wall for the consonants. And here's how to organize the sound wall for the vowels. Each lesson also has assessment items to be used for progress monitoring. These are words to be used on a spelling test. There's also an explanation of how to use the spelling assessment, including information about how to use the data from the assessment for data-based instructional decision-making. Using the progress monitoring data from your spelling assessment, you can plan small groups. Here's an example of how small groups can be organized based on students' results on the progress monitoring tool. And finally, we have a glossary. This glossary incorporates all of the terminology that you might need in order to teach foundational reading skills effectively. You can visit our website to order your copy of UFLI Foundations or to sign up for alerts and updates. The website is where you'll also be able to find all of the free resources to accompany each lesson. There are only a few other materials that you'll need to teach UFLI Foundations lessons. Your students will need some form of manipulative letters. They'll also need something to write on and something to write with. You'll also need a sound wall. We'll have one available soon from our publisher, but any sound wall that represents all 44 phonemes will work. Here's our web address so that you can find more information, and you can also find us on social media. Follow us to keep up to date with new materials and resources. And thanks for tuning in.